So welcome, Josep-Maria and Amos. We have the pleasure of having with us Josep-Maria Mallarach, I think is how you pronounce your name.
Yeah, more or less.
More or less. I hope it's not so bad. So Josep-Maria is a member of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature World Commission for Protected Areas, and of the steering committee and the specialist group on cultural and spiritual values of protected areas. Amos Clifford is the founder of the ANFT and the author of the book Your Guide to Forest Bathing. And today they will both be in conversation discussing some traditional worldviews, beliefs, and value systems that explain the evolution of respectful attitudes towards sacred natural sites. I know both of you met in Lithuania recently, and seems like there wasn't enough time for the conversations that you wanted to have. So here's another chance for you to continue those conversations. So we're very happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And please take us away.
Thank you for that invitation, Gita, or introduction. So, as you mentioned, Josep-Maria and I met recently in Lithuania at a conference there, and I gave a short presentation, I think about 15 minutes, and he followed, his presentation followed mine. I felt like they were one presentation in a way, even though they looked at things from very different angles. And I felt, Josep-Maria, like in meeting you and listening to what you were presenting, I felt like I was meeting a man who carries wisdom and who is an elder in this field, and I'd say that with great respect. And then we got to continue our conversation on the taxi ride back through the countryside, through those beautiful Lithuanian forests, back to Vilnius, and I knew that we'd continue this conversation somehow. Now, I do want to just acknowledge that I suggested this title of Singing Vespers with Wolves because that was a little piece, one little story that Josep-Maria told in his presentation in Lithuania, and it really spoke directly to my heart. So what I'd like to do, Josep-Maria, if this is okay with you, is just turn it over to you to present, and just with your permission, if I have a comment that I want to make or a question or discussion, that we just be conversational during your presentation. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you very much, Amos, for suggesting we had this public conversation now. The other one was a private one. We had both of us.
Yeah.
And well, one of the strings I like to bring to this conversation is the fact that the Christian tradition, since the beginning, has had a strand, so to speak, with a very close connection, existential, spiritual connection to nature. This is very well known, of course, of all kind of spiritual traditions, and especially of indigenous peoples' worldviews, but is less known on Christianity, probably because the Western Christianity, the Western churches, for the last centuries, because of many complex reasons that I will not discuss now, have lost part of this closeness to nature. And that's why the examples that I gave come from Eastern Europe or from the Caucasus Mountains, and from not from Western Europe. And they come from the experiences I have had for the last 20 years or so, in the context of the work we have been doing with Dealers Initiative, in the context of the specialist group, and also advising some World Heritage sites that are managed by monastic communities in different countries. And that has been a privilege for me, because it's been an approach to the worldview of these communities from within, not as a visitor or even as a pilgrim, but working with them, staying there and working with them. And I don't know if I can share some slides. I can try to share some
Yes, please
slides.
do.
Let me try, if it works. Can you see?
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
All right. So here you have a few icons showing holy men befriending with animals, serving animals, or being served by animals. This has been a continuous strand, especially in the Orthodox and Oriental Eastern churches, of people living in communion with nature, either in solitude as hermits or in community as monastic communities of different sizes. But you find as well the same attitude and the same closeness to nature in the Western church in medieval times. Up until the Renaissance is very common. And I like just to read a short text that a man, Bernard of Clairvaux, from the 13th century, he was an abbot of a very famous monastery, Cistercian monastery, and in one of the letters he sends to one of his disciples, he said, "Believe me, my dear friend, to my own experience, you will learn much more in the woods than in books. Trees and stones will teach you things that you would not know elsewhere. You will see for yourself that honey can be extracted from stones and oil from the hardest rocks. Do you not know that joy is distilled from our mountains?" You see this poetic wording, you know. This was considered at the time one of the wisest men in Western Europe, Saint Bernard. And he's suggesting to his disciple to go to the woods and learn there from the woods, from the trees, from the rocks. Is just an example. And in the Eastern churches, you have all kinds of books. Here I just show a few examples. These are books for the children, showing the life of saints of nature, saints that are living or have been living extended periods of their lives in solitude with animals, with all living beings. And these are contemporary images in different. You see that in the upper part, the right upper part, this is a procession that is led by a bear, you see, or befriending with wolves or with all kind of animals. This is common. This is not extraordinary. It's common. The fact that these people befriend with animals, with trees, they communicate very well, they live really in communion. And as a very well-known example, I just wanted to highlight the fact that the Patriarch Bartholomew, the Patriarch of Constantinople, of Istanbul nowadays, has been named the Green Patriarch as the most active Christian leader defending the environmental integrity. He has he has promoted along his life numerous initiatives, very interesting, creative. Here you have the front page of two compilations of his writings or sermons or whatever, towards an ecology of transfiguration. You know, the concept of transfiguration or cosmic grace, you know. So, and he's been promoting the fact that ecocide is included in the international law. For instance, nowadays there is a interfaith coalition promoting this, and he was the first one to suggest that. This is just an example to show that in these Eastern and Orthodox churches, this dimension, I would say the sacramental dimension of nature, has been very, for centuries until nowadays, has been very, very significant. And I like to show you just examples, examples of places where hermits, male or female communities of monks or nuns have been living for many centuries, sometimes 15, 16, 17 centuries, and we have the records. In Eastern Europe until nowadays, in Western Europe, a large proportion of these settlements were destroyed during the numerous revolutions that happened during the 19th century. But here you have some examples. In this image is one of the places where St. Francis of Assisi did retreats. The building was not there at the time, but nowadays there are people doing retreats in this area. Here you have examples of monasteries of Georgia, surrounded by wonderful deciduous forests, or examples I'm showing just examples on different forest ecosystems, just for you to see the variety of landscapes in which Christian monastic communities have settled and have been developing their lives in full harmony with nature. This is an example from Chrysopi from Greece. This is an example of the coastal forests of northeastern Greece. This is Agios is an independent, I will discuss later, an independent monastic republic, which exists within Greece in the context of the European Union. But first, to give a variety of examples, this is from Italy, is nowadays within the national park of Casentino, the Casentino Mountains, with some of the best forests of central Italy that were preserved and carefully managed by the Camaldoli monks, which is a branch of the Benedict monks, for 7 centuries. And we have all the records. And you have a detailed description of all the practices. And in fact, these experiences inspired the Italian forest legislation, which allowed better than other countries the preservation of ancient and old-growth forest. You can nowadays follow Il Sentiero delle Foreste Sacre, the trail of the sacred forests, which allow you to visit some of these wonderful old-growth forests. But you have as well examples, outstanding examples in Serbia, in Romania, in Bulgaria. This is wonderful. This one is Rila. This is the spiritual heart of Bulgaria, located south of the capital, in Sofia, nested in a gorgeous alpine landscape. And the founder, 9 centuries ago, stated that he wanted that the monastery would leave the holy union or holy communion with the forest. That was one of the wishes of the founder, and they kept this wish. There are many examples. I could show hundreds. I am showing just a small sample. And this is the one precisely, Agapia Vecchi, the one I told the story that suggested you the title for this conversation. I was visiting. This is this is a new foundation in Romania. Nowadays, the number of people wishing to live a monastic life is so high that the historic monasteries cannot hold them, cannot keep all of them, and so they need to make new foundations. And this was a new foundation, was established some 10, 12 years ago in the northeast of the Carpathian Mountains in Romania. And in this area, you have, in this region, it's not yet an area, it's part of Moldavia, the Moldavia within Romania, not the independent Moldavia, is a region where you have the highest density of bisons, bears, wolves, monks, and nuns of Europe, all together in this region, living in harmony. And I was visiting this region with the director of the park that was established during the communist regime in the Vanatori Neams Natural Park. And the director is also a member of our specialist group on cultural and spiritual values of protected areas. His name is Sebastian Catanoiu. And we attended the Vespers service in this monastery. We have been discussing with the nuns, but at the time of Vespers, they began the service, very beautiful singing. We stayed there. And after, when the service was over, it was already dark. We went out of the monastery. We were surprised to hear the singing of the wolves all around us. And we stayed still for a few minutes listening, and I was watching the nun who was with us, and she was smiling, very, very happy of listening the wolves. And once the wolves stopped singing, she said to us, now the wolves, finish Vespers. Now you can go out, because our car was perhaps 15 or 20 minutes walking. There was no road. The last portion was by trail. And that was the story I mentioned in Lithuania. But this story, of course, she was talking in a metaphorical way, but not completely. I like now to expand a little bit my explanation. Not completely, in the sense that the Christian and also the Muslim, the Islamic doctrine is very similar in this respect, is that all creatures, all living creatures are praising or glorifying the Creator, the sustainer of life, each on their own voice or silence, whatever, And human beings and the Islamic faith say jinns as well, we have the freedom either to tune or not with this universal glorification. So that's why these hermits or monastic communities that live in communion with nature, they are very much aware. They are experiencing this praise, the praise that all living creatures are singing, in a sense. And there are many, many other stories that I heard from. I just would like to add another one, which is very nice. It was a hermit. Let me see. I like to show, to explain this other story, I like to show the site. This is another new foundation in Romania, as you see, surrounded by very extensive beech tree and fir tree forests. Here it is where the next story I'd like to briefly to discuss. This is a unique monastic republic, to my knowledge, the only one that exists, not only in Europe, but in the world, the only one. In the past, there were 4 in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, but nowadays only this one remains. It's a peninsula. It has the access, the terrestrial access closed by a wall. Therefore, the access is by sea. In fact, it's like if it was an island, let's say. It has about 70 kilometers of length, and mountains that go high to the Mount Athos has more than 2,000 meters of altitude. And in this peninsula, there are around 700 different monastic settlements. It's a monastic republic. It's been a monastic republic for more than 1 millennia. And the result of more than 1 millennia of management by these monastic communities is an outstanding quality, integrity, ecological integrity. And therefore, the entire peninsula has been declared UNESCO World Heritage Site, both natural and cultural. Cultural because it is also preserving this ancient Byzantine culture, right? And natural because of the outstanding quality of the ecosystems. And so in the around this mountain, there are hundreds of hermits living either in huts or caves or whatever. And the next story I'd like to discuss, which comes from one hermit living in this mountain, is that he was, because he passed away a few years ago, he was with a group of disciples during the night, and he was about to begin the midnight service, and there were frogs nearby, very strong, you know. And this saint hermit said to the disciple, please tell the frogs to be quiet because so we can begin our midnight service. And so the disciple went, and when he came back, he said, the frogs told us, be patient until we are done with the matins service. So the frogs were also doing another service, and they asked them to be patient, to wait a little bit, you know. And it was not a joke. I mean, these things happen all the time in these areas. And I like to point out these examples because this is in Europe. This is not in the Himalayas or in the Andes, or this is in Europe, where exceptionally in these areas, this ancient connectedness with nature, sacred, spiritual connectedness with nature has been preserved. And there are, I said there are 700 in this peninsula monastic settlements. They are of different sizes. There are large monasteries with hundreds of monks, and then you have different sizes, Skitis, Kelis, Kelivas, Sikasteria. These are Greek names, and each one has a smaller number of people. Sikasteria usually is one, is a hermit. Keliva, 4, 6, Keli, 10, 12, Skitis can be 20, 30, 40 even. And here you have examples. And the access is the trails that gave access to these hundreds of monastic settlements are only by foot or by mule. There are no motor access in here. And this is another example. This is from the Middle East, from an area where nowadays, tragically, there is a very serious conflict, as you know. But this is the site of the Jesus baptism in the Jordan River. Because of the custodianship of the different churches and the support of the Jordanian government, because this is in the Jordan side of the Jordan River, in the eastern side, has been a recovery of the riparian forest. And there is a very interesting interfaith restoration project involving Christian, Muslim, and Jews working together to restore the integrity of the Jordan ecosystem, which is a very threatened, as you can imagine, ecosystem. And just to finish, I'd like to show a few examples of books in case then some people is curious and wants to explore a little more in depth the ideas I've been briefly discussing. But now I'd like Amos very much to engage with the conversation with you on this very topic.
Well, thank you. First, let me just acknowledge I really am moved by the information that you're bringing and by these beautiful practices that you're making us aware of. You know, you mentioned a couple minutes ago that this is in Europe. This isn't in the Andes or in the Himalayas. And I think a lot of times we tend to make this kind of meeting of a religious, spiritual tradition with the vast beauty of creation. We tend to make that an exotic idea that has to live somewhere far away. And here it is, right in the roots of Western culture, the very roots. We see these monasteries, these communities that are embedded in the forests and the mountains. That image of the bend in the River Jordan, I think it was, where he said Jesus was baptized, and the restoration of the riparian culture, the riparian ecosystem there. I mean, this stuff is just very moving to me. And I thought of a couple of things while you were talking. One thing is, I remember this was pretty early on in our training. We had a couple of people. I'm thinking of one woman in particular in the Chicago area, who, after she did her 6-month guide training and then was guiding for a while, she let us know that she had reconnected with the church of her childhood, that she had, walked away from. So many people have done.
Yeah.
And that she'd reconnected with it and found herself being much more at home there. And I wondered what was going on there. Was there some relationship? And she credited it. She said that the forest therapy had something to do that. Was there some relationship between that and kind of returning home to religious roots? And for me, in my own experience, I would say there is, and I'm very much in an inquiry about that. Now, you quoted Saint Bernard of Clairvaux early in here, and he has recently emerged for me as a key figure in my own thinking here. And particularly, he part of his scholarship was looking into scriptural passages, like the one in particular is from Genesis, where he says God, the Genesis says God created in his image and likeness. And I always thought, well, that's kind of interesting and maybe a little problematic, because now we think that God looks like a human being somehow. But Bernard, of course, took us far beyond that. And he said, one of the key things, he said that image and likeness are two different concepts. They're not the same thing. And the image, to me, has come to mean, I can't say this is completely aligned with Bernard's teaching, but to me, it's come to mean the incorruptible presence of God in the human heart, in our soul, where our soul lives. And likeness then comes with, how do we work that out in our life? And the likeness can be corrupted, but the image is incorruptible. And I think what happens in forest therapy is that little by little we start encountering, we see the many mirrors in creation, the many mirrors that show us something true about who we are. So guiding our consciousness back in to the incorruptible truth of who we are that lives deep in our hearts. So that was one thought I had during your presentation. What do you think of that? Do you think I'm on to am I understanding St. Bernard correctly?
I think so. Perhaps I'm not the best person to make a judgment on that, but in general, I've been fortunate to work, to collaborate with a Cistercian monastery in Catalonia. The name is Santa Maria de Poblet, for 7 years. And I've been spending about 20 days per year, more or less, living with them in order to work with them. And I think that they would agree with your interpretation. And I like to stress another point in relation with that, is that the fact that when we think of monastery, we usually think about a building, a beautiful building. This is not the concept. The traditional concept is a self-sufficient organism, which includes forests, grasslands, croplands, gardens, medicinal gardens, and of course some buildings for pilgrims and buildings for monks or nuns or whatever, you know, but it's an organism. And ideal is an ecosystem, you know, it's self-sufficient. The idea is to be as much self-sufficient as possible in order to keep inner freedom. And then the level, the management, one of the explanations why the management, when they have been able to live at the height of the ideal, let's say, because of course there are cases where there have been decadence or whatever, but I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about the ideal. The ideal is that everything in this organism, in this monastery, and with this organic understanding, has to be managed. This is in the rule of Saint Benedict, as it was a sacred vessel of the altar. So being aware of the sacredness of everything, and that explains why the care has been so finely tuned, you know, so extremely careful. And also another profound explanation, talking with these communities, that I understood that is at the basis of this exceptionally careful management for many centuries, is the understanding of nature is divine manifestation, is what in Greek they say theophany, divine manifestation. Therefore, there is sacred, there is divine presence, there is sacredness. Everything has a sacred value in nature. Everything is, and therefore the way they deal with the forest and with the gardens and everything is exceptionally careful. And that is related with another concept I like to introduce in our conversation, is the spiritual health, the concept of spiritual health. In the Christian tradition, as well in the Islamic and other worldviews, there are three main, let's say, or perhaps four main levels in the human being. The corporeal level, the mental, emotional level, the soul, and the spirit. And perhaps spiritual health can be a little contradictory, because in one sense, a spirit cannot become sick, you know. The soul can become sick. The soul can. But
I think this touches back on Saint Bernard of Clairvaux's differentiation between image and form.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I just wanted to complete this short explanation, saying that the fact that nature, forests, caves, and pristine areas in this tradition had been seen as a place of renewal, as a place of spiritual healing, let's say, explains why this has been this kind of careful approach of management has been developed at the same time. Because if you intend to recover or to sustain your spiritual health, the integrity of your health at all levels of your being, then you need a surrounding, you need that the organism of the monastery is also completely healthy, as much healthy as possible. It could be a profound contradiction to damage the area that sustains you if your purpose in life, like is in the case of monastic communities, is holiness, or like they say in the Orthodox churches, theosis, divinization. You know, if this is your aspiration in life, then the way you deal with other human beings and non-human beings has to be extremely careful, loving, respectful, and is simply logical, you know. And what I found extraordinary is that nowadays this ancient way of life is alive, is still alive, and is in fact flourishing, growing, especially in Eastern Europe, is decaying in Western, but is flourishing and growing in Eastern Europe and recovering in the Caucasus Mountains, in Georgia or Armenia, just to give a few examples. And a last point, in connection with these monasteries and other sacred sites, there are pilgrimage routes. And I think this is also relevant because pilgrimage, especially through mountains, forested areas, and so on and so forth, provides the opportunity to be silent for days, for weeks, whatever it lasts, the pilgrimage, and to tune with nature in a very deep and meaningful way. And for many in Europe nowadays, there is a growing interest in pilgrimage. Many pilgrimages that were almost abandoned at the end of the last century are growing nowadays. New pilgrimages have been established even in countries where pilgrimage were suppressed by the Lutheran Reform 500 years ago, and they are re-emerging. So when these phenomena happen, for me, is that there is a need, you know, there is a spiritual need to reconnect in deep with nature, and pilgrimage offers one possible way, let's say.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up about pilgrimage. As I shared with you, I've become in the last couple of years, in particular, very interested in pilgrimage, and have, while I've lived and taught as best I could the way of the guide, now I'm perhaps more interested in the way of the guided, of being guided by the divine presence, by nature, as we're wandering through life. In just our everyday lives, but also specifically on times and journeys that are dedicated to pilgrimage. So, you know, I've recently did a short pilgrimage in Portugal from Nazaré to Fatima. So Fatima being one of the very famous Marian sites, a site where Mary's apparition has really shaped the local sense of culture. And then more recently, I did 10 days of pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago, which is probably one of the most famous pilgrimage trails. And when I'm doing these pilgrimages, what's come up for me is holding a prayer. Now, I'm partially inspired by the book Way of a Pilgrim, where the Jesus prayer plays a really central role in that. The prayer that I have, I think, is influenced to always be in the sense of an invitation. And so so my little prayer is every step. And sure enough, over a period of 10 days, there were like 6 or 7 pretty and surprisingly simple. You know, like a simple one was simple and profound. Insight that came to me was this idea of walking at the pace. Presentation just before this, walking at the pace of pleasure. That took about, I don't know, 5 or 6 days for that to become apparent to me, that there's just do what our bodies enjoy. And so that was I think that might have come on my 70th birthday, which occurred during that 10 days of pilgrimage walk there. And then as you've been showing your your slides and of all these incredibly beautiful places, I've just been sitting here thinking, I want to do pilgrimage there and there and there. And then I don't know, Josep-Maria, sometime we'll get some pilgrimage time together and to visit some of these places. And I also want to come back and just talk about this idea of the monastery as a part of an organism. It's an organism that includes the forest and the mountains and the rivers and the seashore and all the animals that live there.
Yes.
I think about this because I've had this experience a few times when I'm walking in a forest where I feel like my consciousness, my heart, my mind become a part of a much larger consciousness and mind that is the forest. And so that sense of separation, you know, like my spirit and consciousness lives inside my skin somehow, that dissolves. And instead, it's a much more, I guess what we might call more of a unity experience. Like I have entered the mind of the forest, which is a part of the mind of this land, of this continent, of this planet, of the creator. And so it's a sense of not, what would I say, not making a prayer with words, but being a prayer.
Yeah. You know, the root of the word monk, monastic, the root monos in Greek means unity. So the purpose of the monastic life is unity, is unification. Yeah? Get unite with everything in the world and beyond the world, of course. And I like also.
And so that's what the practices have evolved to.
Exactly.
The monastic practices have evolved to support that. Yeah.
Exactly. And I like also to underline a point you made, which is very significant: joy. I mean, outwardly, what is the sign that some degree of unity has been attained? Overflowing joy. These people flow with joy, and nature around them also is joyful. You know, everyone is happy.
I agree with that, Joseph, but with a little bit of a qualification, which is that often that first contact when we're guiding, what we see is not bursting forth joy, but bursting forth grief.
Yes.
So there's the first contact with this opening can be a very profound grief experience that then opens the doors to joy and to awe.
Yeah. But this is a healing phase, a healing transition, a holy grief that gives access to the joy. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. And another thing you were talking about.
Can I step in there, Amos and Josep-Maria? Sorry to cut you. There's a few questions in the chat.
Yes.
And some reflections, so you might want to address them. We have about 5 minutes left in our time. So shall I read it out?
Can you see those questions? Yeah, maybe you can read them, Gita.
Okay. So we have the freedom to tune with prayers of nature or not. Thank you, Josep, for this quote. How do you tune in? What is your practice, if I may ask?
Well, the Amos shared the practice. My practice is similar, is try to keep, first, try to stop the flow of confused thoughts, and then go to a state of serenity, mental peace, in order to stay in this state, a prayer, a repetitive prayer, a mantra, short prayer helps very much. Perhaps for some people who are already living in a state of deep peace, this is not so important. But I think that for the majority of us, to have a short prayer and use it helps very much. And if you walk, you can tune the prayer with the movements or with breath, you know, and that helps very much to get concentrated and to get in a state of inner peace.
Yeah. Let me comment on one of these comments, Gita, before you read the next one. I see one that says pilgrimage is growing here in the UK. Check out the British Pilgrimage Trust. Part of my pilgrimage was last time I was in the UK, this fellow reached out to me, Guy Hayward, I think is his name. He's the founder of the British Pilgrimage Trust. He said, are there some openings for us to work together? So we met and we went into a forest together and had a great conversation. He took me to what I would consider a sacred site. And the sacred site was a tree that Jimi Hendrix would visit and climb into with his guitar and sit up there and play song. That to me is that's a good pilgrimage destination right there. But anyway, thank you for mentioning the British Pilgrimage Trust. I've been watching what they're doing, and they're doing some really wonderful things. Okay, Gita, back to you for the next question or comment. You're muted. Gita, you're muted.
There are no more questions per se, but a comment on women not being allowed to go to Mount Athos. I don't know if you want to, what can be commented on that?
Well, this is a fact. This is a fact. Is an exceptional fact. Is the only site I know, a sacred Christian site, where women are not allowed, and it has been like that for 11 centuries. I must say that I was told that this area in Hellenic times was a sacred site where men were not allowed to get in. You know, so there has been a kind of a change of polarity in there. The explanation the monks give is that the presence of the Holy Virgin fills everything and excludes. Well, this is a kind of theologic explanation, but this is a fact. Is a place where only male pilgrims, I stress, can access, not visitors, not tourists, pilgrims. And they have a small quota of 320 per day. Out of 300 must be Orthodox, and only 20 non-Christian Orthodox are allowed per day as pilgrims. And pilgrimage there lasts for 4 nights. You are invited. You have to pay absolutely nothing. You are always invited in these monasteries, and you walk from one monastery to the next. And after 4 nights, you are supposed to leave. However, there are men who get so touched by the experience that they decide to stay, and they become monks. And it is quite common, in fact. And that's why there are lots of people that get in as pilgrims and stay as monks. But it's a fact. It's a fact that women are not allowed in this monastic republic. But I'd like to stress that this is an exceptional case of this republic. All the Christian monasteries are open. The largest monasteries on the Carpathian Mountains, which are female monasteries, in fact, are open to both male and female, and they are very hospitable, and all of them welcome pilgrims, all of them. So this is the general. The exception is Mount Athos.
Oh, thank you for that.
I may say yes, it's true, and I'm Greek. That's why I know this very well. That's why I made the comment. I am Greek, so
thank you.
It's okay. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think we're coming up. We're on the end of our conversation now, and I would just like to say once again, Josep-Maria, I am so feel so happy and blessed to have met you and to be coming into these conversations and what I hope will be a lasting friendship that will at some point in the future involve some trail time together on some piece of our pilgrimages in life. So thank you so much.
I do hope so. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation today. And I hope that the people who has been listening to us can get some insight, some inspiration from our conversation.
Maybe so, yes. Mhm.
Thank you both very much for being here today. It was a very inspiring conversation. So for everyone, we're going to have a little break now, and we'll be back on the hour to share with you a recording of a conversation that was pre-recorded this week between Amos Clifford and Dr. Louise Livingston. Very inspiring around the heart sense and our relationship to nature through it. So we welcome you to stay for that. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.